I'm sorry for stopping, but you know what? I have to double check. I have to take what I call an idiot check to see if I did everything right. And I did. How about that? Start a channel with your favorite music, and the background is images from this one. You'll get subscribers you never dreamed of. So, like, just make a music channel and live stream music. Yeah, I thought about that, But man, this channel takes up so much time. Researching, doing audio, building the video. It's a good 60 hours can go into one video.
So Greg, start a channel with your fave music and the background is images from this one. You'll get subscribers you never dreamed of.
Oh, it sounds dreamy. Where do I sign up? I was thinking about that, Craig. The garden is the natural. Yes, by all means, what you need to do is do a search for Gardens of Allah by Don Henley and listen to every word. It gives me chills, man. I mean, how could he be thinking like Satan, But he was. I mean, he was talking to himself like the devil. I think it's interesting. Okay, I'll shut up now. I'm live streaming. Everything's good. Back to Walt. It's a good idea. I may just do that. Thank you.
Herschel reveals a ribbon of future stars. This was reported on March the 30th this year. So this is a very recent picture. Stars and planets are formed by powerful electromagnetic forces like pearls on a cosmic string. This is a quote from an earlier report. Gravity can be ignored. Plasma cosmology. There is no gravitational accretion. There's no way you can form a string like that using gravity. Gravity is a central force, and the material tends to come into a centre. It doesn't form a string. But this recent report says, and this is important, stars are shot out of the filaments by a slingshot mechanism. And there's a diagram here which shows the filaments moving around like those in the plasma ball, you know, where they snake about. The stars, having been formed in this filament, are left behind as the filament moves on, and these stars are shot out. And it's interesting because Tony Peratt described to us once the effect seen in high-energy discharge experiments as these plasmoids scattered like buckshot. Now, it's not only stars that are formed here, it's all of stars that shouldn't be there. They're the wrong age, the wrong population. Recently, looking at globular clusters, they've been puzzled by the chemical composition of those stars because it was thought they must have all been produced at the same time in the same event, and yet they're finding compositions which don't fit that picture. In the electric universe, all stars produce heavy elements at their surface, in their photospheres, where strong electrical discharge activity is taking place. And of course, on Earth in the laboratory, this is exactly the way we produce isotopes and heavier elements in the laboratory, is by electrical power applied to accelerators. So there's nothing mysterious there. The standard model, on the other hand, requires purely theoretical and untestable things to be going on unseen inside stars. When it comes to star exploding, the electrical model is simplicity itself, and it doesn't require the star to be of any particular age, because in the electrical model, of course, electrical power is supplied to all stars and is the source of their light and heat and the radiation from them. Now, Hans Alfvén pointed out that the circuits in space also include what are called double layers, where charge is separated across a very small region of space. Those double layers can act like a switch, and if that switch is thrown, then the circuit is broken, and all of the energy stored in the magnetic fields of that circuit, which can extend far beyond the star into the galaxy itself, is concentrated on that double layer, that switch.
Fighting to survive.
And that switch can actually be at the surface of the star. So a supernova explosion is purely an electrical explosion. It's the kind of thing that has been photographed, and you can see on YouTube, when high voltage transmission power lines, the circuit is opened at an inappropriate time, and a huge arc stretches between the two electrodes as they separate.
Electric fire.
So you could say that what you're looking at in a supernova explosion is the opening of a stellar switch, when that star suddenly brightens to the point where it can outshine all of the rest of the stars in that galaxy.
One of the most interesting phenomena in the sky is the so-called pulsar. A pulsar is an object that is observed to put out pulses, both of light and radio activity, RF, in the RF spectrum. And those pulses are extremely rapid. They are something like milliseconds apart. So it's like a extremely fast strobe light. And thinking of a strobe light, astronomers immediately leapt to the lighthouse kind of analogy. Something that must be spinning around, the beam is going around, and it's going around so quickly that this thing goes flash, flash, flash. Well, once the repetition rate of the pulsars was observed to get up to in the millisecond range, that meant that this star that was putting out this beam of radiation would have had to be rotating at 300 times a second. And 300 times a second, we're talking about the speed of a dentist drill. So the astronomers decided, well, normal stars couldn't possibly rotate at that speed, and so they postulated the existence of what they called a neutron star. A neutron star is a star that is so dense that it holds together so well that it can indeed rotate at the speed of a dentist's drill. Well, the problem is that in nuclear chemistry, we know that you can't pack neutrons together that densely. They will all fly apart instantaneously. There's a principle called the island of stability in nuclear chemistry that absolutely prevents that. So here again we have the standard astronomers or astrophysicists going directly against another well-developed science. In the electrical model, however, there's a very simple explanation for pulsars. Everybody is familiar with the idea that the pulses can travel back and forth on electrical transmission lines. Such uncontrolled pulses, for example, were responsible for the famous Northeast blackouts. A similar effect can occur between two binary stars connected by a plasma. The two binary stars act like capacitors that store charge. And if you reduce that in size to something you can produce in the laboratory, you can produce it in the laboratory, and it's called a relaxation oscillator. And electrical engineers use it and have used it for decades. The idea of producing pulses every few milliseconds is a sophomore level experiment in an electrical engineering laboratory. It doesn't require neutronium, strange matter, or any other fictitious device. All it requires is two capacitors, a battery, and a nonlinear resistor. And we maintain that that's exactly what a binary pair of stars connected by a plasma field presents. A typical ion in the solar wind, hydrogen nucleus, moving about 20 kilometers per second, which is relatively slow for the ions in the solar wind, in the magnetic field of the sun, experiences potentially magnetic forces that are something like 10 million times the strength of the gravitational force on that same ion from the sun. An interesting demonstration that illustrates very readily the relative strength of magnetic force and gravitational force is the simple idea of a ball bearing sitting on a wooden table. The entire mass of the Earth is pulling downward on that little ball bearing, and that's what prevents it from flying out into space. But a child can come along with a little horseshoe magnet and click, pick that ball bearing up instantly.
So far, standard model is batting a whopping 0. It's almost impossible to believe. It's almost as if, well, if we're going to be wrong on one thing, let's be wrong on everything, and then we can just blame the other people because it'll be so whack that the problem will have to be with them. I don't know, I'm just guessing. The big picture, the settled science. And here's just a few of the things that they have wrong. The Big Bang hypothesis is almost surely wrong, where nothing exploded. The expanding universe. Holt and Arp proved that redshift was intrinsic. It does not have to do with running away. Dark energy, phantom, fudge factor, galaxy formation, which is a good one. Dark matter, same thing. Black holes, I know they took a picture of one, didn't they? Yeah, they've done that about 3 or 4 times lately. That's a plasmoid. It's not a black hole. Yeah, how come it is they never could get a picture of one until just recently, when they feel threatened? Nebular theory, neutron stars, island of stability does not allow neutrons to hold together. That's why they call it a pulsar now. But some people still call it neutron star. Supernova theory. Wrong. Protoplanetary disk. Thermonuclear sun. Isolated heliosphere. Planet formation. Uniformitarianism. Planetary stability. Snowball comets. Asteroids. And human origins. They're in the hole right now. The big picture of space, gravity alone rules the cosmos. That's their big picture. And that gravity's behavior must be interpreted through the lens of relativity theory. We got a little recording by... This is a quasi-famous scientist that you may or may not know who it is, but I disguise his voice so I don't make it obvious.
Well, I've been, other faculty members at times within Boston University, not within my particular college or division, but like any big universities, there are numerous colleges and schools within the university and people in an archaeology department, in another college within the university. For instance, I've denied that I'm a faculty member at Boston University. They did this behind my back in Egypt, for instance, and thought it would never get back to me. They've been very nasty. They tried to get me fired, some of them. They've tried to make life miserable for me. What has protected me, and I think I'm in better shape now. A lot of this has occurred over the last quarter century since I got involved in this whole business about 1990 when I first went to Egypt. And the early days of coming out, it was very difficult. A lot of criticism, a lot of nasty name calling. Academics to me, very bitter, very nasty, very petty. There's a lot of vested interest, a lot of egos. So I've seen my share.
Yeah, just the way that academia treats them is stepped out of bounds. So except science is supposed to be ever changing, ever correcting. That's not science. It's a scam.
We've got a whole new universe, and the theoreticians are still trying to look at it through. A friend of mine says they're peering through the wrong end of the telescope and telling us what they imagine they see.
Than gravity. And the answer is that through the years we've used optical telescopes, but recently we have what are called radio telescopes, and we've broadened the spectrum that we can look at the sky with. And those radio telescopes can measure electric currents and magnetic fields, and we can determine from those measurements the strength of the electric currents, the strength of the forces involved, and the amount of energy that's stored out there in space.
The two major pillars of modern cosmology are based on the theories of relativity and quantum theory. And yet, as Einstein himself noted, the two are incompatible. And that may be because the theories of relativity deal with matter as if its only consequence is the bending of space. The electric universe, on the other hand, deals with the electrical structure of matter at the subatomic level and then works its way up through living systems, if you like, planets, stars, galaxies, and the entire universe, and shows that it is the electrical structure of matter that forms the amazing shapes we see in deep space. Begin to see arcs and sparks, if you like, electrical discharge phenomena.
You can forget how good Thunderbolts Gods is.
The standard theory of comets comes from the view that the solar system was formed from a rotating cloud of gas and dust, and that the planets, in some fashion as yet unexplained completely, formed from most of that gas and dust, but there were leftovers. And the leftovers are beyond sight, outside the solar system, in a hypothetical Oort cloud, as it's called. We have no observational evidence for such a cloud. The electric universe model of comets is that they are actually parts of well-differentiated planetary bodies that have in the past suffered from electrical plasma discharge machining, and that some of the surface material has been lofted into space. So it is expected to be rocky. The second thing is that because comets trace a elongated orbit, both away from the sun and towards the sun, in that trajectory, its charge changes, its voltage changes. Since it spends most of its time in the outer solar system, the voltage that it has reflects the voltage in the outer solar system. But as it hurtles towards the sun, as it enters towards the Earth's orbit, the voltage is changing rapidly, and the comet has to respond to that by beginning to discharge. And that's where we see the familiar cometary phenomena of the coma and the various tails that it produces.
Some of the natural consequences of electrocosmology are the patterns that we see, both in the laboratory and in the sky. A very good example of this is the work of Dr. Anthony Peratt, who was a graduate student of the very famous Hannes Alfvén, who was really the father of electric cosmology. Peratt simulated on a supercomputer using just a cloud of electrical charges and a magnetic field, just using the laws of electrical science, not using anything to do with gravity. He simulated what looked like a spiral galaxy. And the interesting thing is that Peratt's spiral galaxy in the laboratory had exactly the same rotational properties as the real spiral galaxies that we see in the sky do.
The sun just dominates our sky as the source of light and warmth and life itself on Earth. And this preeminence of the sun is so clear and obvious that it remains a mystery why virtually every ancient culture insisted that before the present sun, there was a quite different luminary ruling the sky. The central sun, the superior sun, the best sun, the motionless sun. And all of these cultures, whatever may be the meaning of these traditions, are insisting that the sky has changed. Of course, our ideas about the sun have continually changed. Only a few centuries ago, the sun was a campfire or ember in the sky. Then, early in the 20th century, under the influence of gravitational theory, the sun was seen as a gravitationally collapsing nebular cloud. In the atomic age, astronomers began to visualize the sun in terms of a nuclear furnace hidden at its core. But now we're in the age of plasma science, with discoveries of the electric currents in space. And it's inconceivable that these discoveries would not change the picture of the sun again.
Plasma cosmologists have been able to demonstrate experimentally and also in the supercomputer that galaxies are an electrical phenomenon, which raises the question about stars, and in particular our own sun, which is the closest star to the Earth, of course. Any theory of the sun has to explain how it could continue to turn for billions of years, and also explain its present size based on its known mass. And of course, as soon as nuclear energy was discovered, it was grasped immediately as the energy source of the sun. But all of that assumes that the sun is disconnected and an isolated body, and that it must consume itself over its lifetime to provide the heat and light that we receive from it. But if the sun is connected to the rest of the galaxy in an electrical sense, it doesn't require to burn itself at all. And the energy that we receive is actually being received from the galaxy, and the sun is acting as a focus for that energy.
The sun is actually a fairly typical star. And so if we want to understand stars and cosmology, we really have to understand the sun. And the standard model of the sun, so-called, that astronomers are so very proud of these days, really doesn't explain very much about the sun. Why is there a corona in the first place? Everybody knows about the corona, the beautiful corona that we see during solar eclipses. Why is it there? It's clearly an electrical phenomenon.
One of the greatest puzzles about the sun has been, with a surface temperature of 6,000 degrees, high above that surface we have temperatures of millions of degrees. And the question has been, how do we get the energy from the center of the sun somehow past that surface to heat the upper atmosphere of the sun to millions of degrees? In the electric model, you don't have that problem, because if the energy is arriving from outside the sun, the first place you expect to see that energy expressed is above the sun in its tenuous atmosphere. And that is the place where particle acceleration occurs, and the apparent temperature goes very high indeed, up into the millions of degrees.
The fact that the particles in the solar wind accelerate, that is to say, increase their velocity with increasing distance away from the sun, the farther away they get, the faster they go. And the fact that those particles are indeed charged particles leads me, as an electrical engineer, to come to the immediate conclusion that this is an electrical process. In the solar model, think of the sun as being a positive anode, very high voltage body that obviously would emanate an electric field. And if you put a charged particle in an electric field, it will accelerate. That's the way we accelerate particles here on Earth. It's the way every physicist and electrodynamicist has ever increased the velocity of a charged particle, is put it in an electric field.
One of the features we observe on the sun, which have no business being there, according to the standard model, are sunspots. The most significant thing about a sunspot is the fact that the center of the sunspot is dark. And if the sun is trying to radiate energy from its core into space, we should expect that it is bright.
And if you think about that umbra, that darkest place in the center of sunspots, that's the place where we can see deepest into the sun. And just consider the fact that at that point where we can really see down into the sun, that's the absolute coldest place that we are able to measure. If the center of the sun is really a nuclear fusion furnace, it should be the hottest because we're closest to the source, and it's not the case. If you ask any astronomer, why are there sunspots, why are the umbra dark, they will blame it on some sort of warped, twisted magnetic fields. They will say that it has to do with the solar dynamo, all of which lurk unseen like a big genie somewhere below the surface. These phenomena are only to be expected if the sun is electrical in nature. Astrophysicists make the claim that the solar fusion model has indeed been tested in the laboratory, and nothing really is further from the truth. Although each of the steps involved in the hydrogen to helium fusion reaction have indeed been verified experimentally, the overall experiment, the overall reaction, has never been produced in a continuous laboratory experiment. Continuous hydrogen to helium fusion has not been attained in the lab. The strength, in fact, of the electric cosmology is that indeed all of the mechanisms that the electrical people talk about have indeed been verified over decades, in fact, at least a century, in the laboratory. The plasma scaling is well known, and plasma and electrical experiments have verified every step of the way. There are any number of observations that have ad hoc present explanations, but really have no explanation in the standard model, and are natural consequences of the electrical model. For example, heavy elements, the solar spectrum, the neutrino deficiency, the neutrino variability, solar atmosphere, differential rotation by latitude, differential rotation by depth, equatorial plasma torus, sunspots, sunspot migration, the sunspot penumbra, and the sunspot cycle itself. Magnetic field strength, the even magnetic field, helioseismology, the solar density, and the changing size. All of the observations that in that list are natural consequences of the electrical sun model. Standard astronomers tend to pass them off as being inconsequential difficulties that will eventually someday be solved. I maintain, and so do our colleagues here, that these are not inconsequential, but are rather death blows to the solar fusion model, because they are important. They're not secondary. their primary falsifying observations for that failed nuclear fusion model.
Do you know where the current solar model theory came from? Walt Thornhill tells the story better than I ever could, so I'll let him tell you.
Phys.org, titled Stellar Mystery Deepens. A Monash University-led research team made an unexpected discovery that a large group of stars are dying prematurely, challenging our accepted view of stellar evolution. Their results revealed that large numbers of helium-burning stars are dying prematurely in the M4 globular cluster. Professor Latanzio from the Max Planck Institute for Astrophysics said, "Globular clusters are some of the oldest objects in the universe. Although we have some ideas for what is going on in them, every time we look carefully we find something unexpected. They are both fascinating and frustrating at the same time." The international team found that about half of the stars tend to skip the red giant phase, instead becoming white dwarfs millions of years ahead of schedule. Demonstrating once again what's wrong with the modern scientific method, characterized as shut up and simulate, Professor Latanzio continued, "Computer simulations do not agree with this observation. So, as well as continuing observations, new computer models will need to be generated to better understand what is taking place in the cores of these stars. But the computer models are built on missing or invalid concepts. There's nothing going on in the cores of stars, and globular clusters are not understood. So the mathematical computer simulations produce a virtual, unreal cosmos that, like the movies, can be programmed to produce anything you can imagine. And the artist's impressions we see in science reports are little more than glossy advertising material, but much more deceptive because it is falsely labelled real science. There is no real mystery here. With no nuclear fire inside, stars don't die by bloating to a red giant and collapsing to a white dwarf as their fire goes out. The life and death stories of stars are fictional. The bloated appearance of red giants is not due to internal pressure caused by hypothetical helium burning at 100 million degrees in the core of a star. It is a purely electrical effect witnessed in laboratory low-pressure gas discharge tubes. Red stars are those that satisfy their need for electrons from the surrounding plasma by expanding the surface area over which they collect electrons by growing a large plasma sheath that becomes the effective anode in space. The growth process is self-limiting because as the sheath expands, its electric field grows stronger. Electrons caught up in the field are accelerated until they become energetic enough to excite neutral particles they chance to collide with, and the huge sheath becomes a uniform red anode glow. It becomes a red giant star. The electric field driving this process will also give rise to a massive flow of positive ions away from the star, or in more conventional terms, a prodigious stellar wind. Such loss of matter is a characteristic feature of red giants. Standard stellar theory is at a loss to explain this since the star is said to be too cold to boil off a stellar wind. Arthur Eddington himself expressed his puzzlement about white dwarfs. Strange objects, which persist in showing a type of spectrum entirely out of keeping with their luminosity, may ultimately teach us more than a host which radiates according to rule. He was right. A white dwarf appears extremely hot, white and underluminous because it is a faint white coronal discharge. As usual, a thin plasma sheath will be formed between the plasma of the star and the plasma of space. The electric field across the plasma sheath is capable of accelerating electrons to generate ultraviolet light and X-rays when they hit atoms in the atmosphere. And the power dissipated is capable of raising the temperature of a thin plasma layer to tens of thousands of degrees. The spectral lines are broadened, sometimes to the point of disappearance, due to the coronal electric field. This gives the misleading impression that hydrogen, whose spectral lines are smeared the most, is missing in many of these stars, and that therefore they are remnants of larger stars that have conventionally lost or burned their hydrogen fuel. So, globular clusters are not some of the oldest objects in the universe. Their spherical shape of a dense collection of stars and their elliptical orbits about the galactic centre hint at a quasar-style birth process from the plasmoid at the heart of the galaxy. If so, the electromagnetic environment inside the globular cluster is different to that in open clusters of stars, so we should expect an unusual distribution of white dwarfs and red giant stars. And the puzzling observation that some globular cluster stars have 100 times more iron than others could also be explained by electromagnetic sorting of elements within the globular cluster at its birth. The fact we don't understand stars in the 21st century highlights what Arthur Koestler wrote in The Sleepwalkers. The history of cosmic theories in particular may without exaggeration be called a history of collective obsessions and controlled schizophrenia, and the manner in which some of the most important individual discoveries were arrived at reminds one more of a sleepwalker's performance than an electronic brain's. Science is still in its childhood, and we behave as infants. We give far too much credit to scientists for knowing what they are talking about.
For continuous updates on space news from the electric universe, stay tuned to Thunderbolts.info.
Mechanism. Of course, the astronomer's got it back to front. If you do a mirror image, then you have a more understandable arrangement where the stars get brighter and bluer as you increase the current density, so that you get this straight line curve, which is exactly what you'd expect. Red stars have to expand. That's both red dwarfs and red giants. They're stars which are not collecting enough electricity to satisfy the discharge, so plasma adjusts. It's like a living thing almost. It adjusts to its environment. And so it expands the anode sheath to collect enough current. And some of those anode sheaths are monstrous. You know, Betelgeuse, if that star was in our solar system, its photosphere reaches out to the orbit of Jupiter. White dwarfs, on the other hand, may be a normal-sized star, but they have no bright photosphere. Their upper atmosphere is in direct contact with the plasma of space. They have only a faint white corona. Imagine if the sun's photosphere turned off, you would see this white envelope, very faint, but very white, very high temperature in appearance. So stellar evolution is a fairy story. This is V838 Monocerotis. This erupting star transformed itself over a period of months from a small underluminous star, a little hotter than the sun, to a highly luminous, cooled supergiant star undergoing rapid and complex brightness changes. This was the quote of the article describing it. The transformation defies the conventional understanding of stellar life cycles. It's a very complex story. I've been through it, the theory of it. So here's a red giant. This is actually Betelgeuse. It's 500 times the size of the sun, and it has a hot spot. You've got to ask yourself, what's a hot spot doing on a red giant star? What happens is as that envelope expands, the electric field grows stronger because it's trying to collect electrons from space. But on the other hand, positively charged particles, in other words, its stellar wind, are accelerated more strongly the other way. So you have this anomaly where these cool stars have the most powerful winds known. And if the stellar wind is being boiled off, so to speak, this doesn't make any sense at all. Betelgeuse sports a hot spot, and I've suggested it may be above one of its poles because one of the Alphane circuits shows that one of the connections of the electric circuit is to the poles of the star. So we may be staring at one of the poles. Giants and dwarfs. The usual story is that stars consume their fuel and change to giants or dwarfs. The story is complex, unverifiable, and regularly contradicted. This is another version of the HR diagram there. And astronomers are perpetually astonished by unexpected changes in stars. This is a white dwarf system. Sirius B is the white dwarf, and Sirius A, you'll see an optical light here. Sirius A is very bright in the sky, and Sirius B is almost invisible, and it's a faint white, so-called white dwarf. Now, if you look at it in X-rays, it's the reverse. Here's Sirius B, it's brighter than its optically bright partner Sirius A. This is what you'd expect, where the discharge reaches into the ionosphere directly of a star. The X-ray output is high, the visual light output is low. There's nothing special about that. It can be an ordinary star. It's just that its partner may have usurped most of the current.
Yeah, that kind of puts you totally out of the question.
It's supposed to be a collapsed star at the end of its fuel. But how can an old and a young star be together? Because here you have an old and a young star, so to speak, under the conventional ideas, together. A white dwarf has no bright photosphere. Its white light and X-rays come from an intense corona. Here's the different star types, and I've shown how I think they would look. A red dwarf is actually quite large. In other words, it's like a red giant in miniature. A red dwarf was discovered, and the astronomers decided that it was putting out too much light for what they assumed was a dwarf star. So they said, oh, it must be a pair of red dwarfs of exactly the same size and power output. I suggested no, it's a single red dwarf. It's just much bigger than anyone ever expected. Main sequence star, it is covered with photospheric tufting, tufted anode and a controlled discharge. Blue giants are a large star under high electrical stress. Red giants are a normal star under low electrical stress, and it develops a glowing plasma sheath. A white dwarf is a normal star in direct contact with space plasma and has low luminosity. Talking about brown dwarfs, if a brown dwarf gets close to a very bright star, the bright star is at a higher potential than the brown dwarf. That brown dwarf will actually switch off as a star and become a comet. It switches from being an anode in the discharge system to being a cathode, and there are quite distinct differences. Now, if the Earth, hypothetically here, if the Earth was a satellite of a brown dwarf, that radiating shell would be quite enormous. It could have all of the satellites of that object, that small star, orbiting within that envelope. That whole radiating envelope puts energy on the surface of any orbiting planet equally on every square metre. So that you would have no seasons, no day and night, and you'd receive ultraviolet light. This refers to what Dwight was talking about the other day with the earliest memories of mankind. It suggests that we were in this situation, and astronomers in recent years have come to the conclusion that this is the more likely place for life to thrive. Where we are now is much more precarious. So brown dwarfs don't hang out with stars because electrically it's impossible. The other thing is that these brown dwarfs, unexpectedly, they flare. They throw material off occasionally because they've got no means of controlling their discharge other than to get rid of material, matter, charged matter. So that any satellites of these brown dwarfs gets occasionally drowned in water, an atmosphere, and also solid materials to cause layering on them. Brown dwarfs flare and deposit layered minerals on their satellites. There's a few more logical leaps involved in the electric universe, and I'll just go through a few of them. I asked the question, is gravity a weak electric dipole-to-dipole force between distorted subatomic particles? And this refers to something that Velikovsky said to me when I visited him, and also to Ralph Sansbury's view that all subatomic particles have an orbital structure, a resonant orbital structure. And as Ralph has pointed out, magnetism then is also an electric dipole-to-dipole force due to transverse distortion of electrons or protons accelerated in an electric field. If so, the electric force is the only force necessary in physics, and this goes back to the way classical physics operated by trying to reduce the number of forces and ideas. And quantum effects imply that all matter has a resonant electrical substructure. Information and energy can be stored and transferred via these matter resonances, and that has significance in biological systems too. So astrophysical and biological coherence requires universal, near-instantaneous electrical interactions. All of the so-called spooky quantum things are no longer spooky if we accept this idea. We have a return of the ether. We must have particles to be able to transfer the energy and the forces through so-called empty space. Empty space, I suggest, is full of neutrinos. Neutrinos are the lowest energy state of matter. They exhibit vanishingly small mass. They're composed of subtrons, which is what Ralph called them. They form electric dipoles, that is the neutrinos, in an electric field, and each dipole rotates in the electromagnetic field of a light wave. That ties the speed of light in a vacuum to the moment of inertia of a neutrino. and neutrinos may reintroduce cause and effect to radioactive decay. At present, it's a purely statistical phenomenon. The other thing is that it also solves the difficulty of the so-called annihilation and creation of matter in particle accelerators. You cannot do it, but if the neutrinos are the substrate, they can accept energy and become a particle and its mirror particle. I don't use the word antiparticle because there's no such thing. It's all matter, normal matter. I put these few slides on the end because there was discussion about Venus and the transfer of charge, and I think it's important because it returns Velikovsky's gauntlet to him cordially. Velikovsky argued that planets change orbits, exchange thunderbolts, and quickly settle into peaceful orbits. Now, rapid settling after chaos defies Newton's laws, which, of course, that was the argument levelled against Velikovsky, which for more than a two-body gravitational system are chaotic anyway. So the astronomers have yet to explain why we have a stable solar system. So astronomers simply ignored the gauntlet flung down by Velikovsky. Then we have Anthony Peratt and the convergence of his work with ours some few years ago. And he showed, globally, petroglyphs show to a high degree of confidence that within human existence the Earth has suffered stupendous electric discharge phenomena from the heavens. And that's a picture of one of his papers. Now, if we accept Velikovsky's gauntlet, we need to look at Newton's law of gravity again and just have a think about what it really means. You'll notice there that G, I put its dimensions there just to show that it does include mass. And if mass is a variable, then we have a problem. It is simply assumed that G is the same for all bodies in the universe. In other words, the universal gravitational constant, and that was an assumption. Stellar and planetary structure and composition is based upon this premise, but if mass is a variable, can it explain cosmic pool? The book over there is by one of the Thunderbolts team, C.J. Ransom, The Age of Velikovsky. Of course, MOND is the latest buzzword in gravity theory, the modified Newton's dynamics. I've suggested that we can have electrically modified Newtonian dynamics. And I won't go through all that business there, you can see it on my website and so on. But the upshot is that the radius of the orbit of the planet is proportional to the mass of the planet if you keep the orbital energy constant and you assume the sun's G is constant, and I think that's a fair assumption. If the mass doubles, the orbital radius must double to conserve orbital energy. Now, I said earlier that all planets and stars and all celestial objects will form an electret. In other words, you have positive poles facing inwards and negative poles facing outwards. So it sets up an internal electric field. The planet acts like an electret. And any free electrons would tend to drift towards the surface. Like a subatomic particle under the stress of an electric field, the internal electrical stress modifies the apparent mass of the planet or star, and therefore its gravity. Exchanging charge at the surface through lightning, etc., changes the mass or gravity of a planet. And there is evidence for that. Coronal mass ejections, large ones which strike the Earth, actually change the rate of spin of the Earth suddenly, and then it decays back to its original speed, which is diagnostic of a change of the moment of inertia of the Earth by some means which hasn't been explained. Comet accelerations also. Cometry displays an obvious electric discharge phenomenon. Any body on an eccentric orbit about the Sun will experience discharge activity. The discharge will cause apparent non-Newtonian acceleration, and this is well known with comets. They're very hard to predict their precise return because of them. And this is because the mass of the comet is changing, something that's not taken into any account. However, gravity is still the operative force, but here we have a feedback mechanism which can modify orbits. So, changing planetary mass. The closer the encounter between two planets and the more powerful the charge exchange between planets, the greater the orbital adjustments. It seems an efficient mechanism for collision avoidance and spacing the planetary orbits apart, which may explain one of the reasons why we survived Velikovsky's catastrophic scenario. The inner planet reduces its charge polarization, its mass, and the outer planet increases its polarization, mass, in the exchange. And I ask the question, is this possible? Yes, I believe it is. Because Some years ago, it was reported that a spacecraft here, the SOHO spacecraft, picked up stringy plasma things, arriving from Venus when it was between us and the Sun. Now, those stringy things, of course, are recognised immediately as Birkeland currents, and the Birkeland currents transfer electrons from Venus to the Earth. At present, it has little or no effect on the Earth because of the distance and the low current density. So there's an intermittent circuit for transferring electrons from the inner planet to the outer when they're aligned with the Sun. The charge transfer is in the correct sense to induce the planets to move apart into orbits having electrical least interaction. Quickly it will appear as though the system operates according to Newton's laws with no sign of recent instability, and that was the problem that Velikovsky faced, and it was the question I asked him when I visited him. How do we deal with this problem? And I think this is the answer, or part of the answer. And we come to the Sagnac Award winner, and I consider a great man, a modern Galileo. Dr. Halton Arp embraces a plasma universe. I think it's a very apt photograph. Also, I might say there are a lot of interesting issues raised by Halton Arp's discoveries that fit neatly in an electric universe solution. For example, intrinsic quantized redshift and an increase of mass with time were explained by an electrical origin for particle masses and their resonant quantized states. Because the quasars are ejected from a galaxy, the electrons are tangled up in the plasmoid at the centre of a galaxy for far longer than the neutrons, which can escape because they're uncharged, and the protons, which are heavier. So that quasars are electron deficient initially, which means that all of their energy levels of all their matter will function at a lower level. Their fine structure constant will be different. Their redshift spectrum will be enhanced. But over time, as the electrons stream out in those great jets that we see, both the mass increases, but it does so in resonant steps, quantized steps, and the brightness increases because the electrical energy arriving is increasing. And so this explains this very strange phenomenon where a quasar ejected at very high speeds from the centre of an active galaxy can actually slow down and go into orbit about its parent. So this is the quasar mass gain. You can see this is one of Arp's diagrams of the birth and the development of quasars into companion galaxies. Intrinsic redshift, an increase in mass of subatomic particles equals an increase in the orbital energies of electrons within atoms in the quasar. That results in a decrease in redshift of the quasar. And since subatomic particles are resonant systems of charge, the redshift must decrease in quantum jumps. Now, any explanation for this kind of intrinsic redshift gets over the problems that you face if you're trying to talk about the medium between us and the quasar, because you cannot quantize, as far as I can imagine, the redshift by anything that occurs between us and the emitting object, but it's intrinsic to the emitting object.
We live in a great big world. I have found in that big world there are things that occasionally come along that are not easily explained. Mysteries. I have always been attracted to these mysteries since I can remember. But I only know one thing. The older I get, the more I learn. That's a given. But the weirder and stranger this world gets. There is still very much we do not know about our world, but these are some of my favorites. Just a few at this time. And I'm also up for new content, so let me know what you think. Now, these are some of the strangest things that I've come across, or known about for some time. And of course, if you're anything like me, the stranger it is, the more intrigued I am. The more I want to find out what, if anything, is there. And a few of them you might want to chuckle or even scoff out of hand at. But have you ever thought something was completely ridiculous only to find out it was true? The question I asked in the history video is still valid. To me, everything deserves a serious look. Check some of these things out and let me know what you think, because your comments positively give me a different direction, or can make me see it in an entirely different way, which I'm not stating I believe it. I'm just presenting it to say, what do you think of this? It's happened before. Okay, let's get it going.
Let's get down. Get back up again.
Number 1. Giants of renown. There are many tales of a lost civilization of giants, as old as humanity itself. There are the titans of ancient Greek myths who battled the gods of Olympus. Actually, history and the whole planet are littered with their bones and graves. For some reason, the Smithsonian Institute just won't go there. It's very difficult to get any truth. For whatever reason, mainstream does not want us to know. In the 1960s, giants were common knowledge and thought to have existed. They even had a children's show called The Friendly Giant. But then flying carpets and giants just disappeared off the face of the earth. But the most well-known giants are the ones that are in the Bible. The Bible describes giants as the product of supernatural beings called Nephilim mating with earth women. The Quran speaks of giants. Of Ad and Kamut speak of huge and powerful giants who apparently could uproot trees with their bare hands. In my video from Velikovsky's Nephilim, he says this: as the dethronement and emasculation of Uranus by Kronos. If the ancient legends of a battle between the gods and titans, so persistent in the Greek world, but also in the mythologies of other civilizations, have any historical value, we may try to find what may have been the substratum of this fantasy. It seems that following great convulsions of nature, observable in the celestial sphere, giant bodies were hurled on the earth. They arrived, burned, and were crushed by impact. But at least one group of escapees succeeded in safely reaching the earth. They descended on Mount Hermon, or Anti-Lebanon. Of the extra-biblical traditions dealing with the subject, some reach hoary antiquity. And in a second essay by Velikovsky on the subject of giants, she says this: certain. The Hebrew scriptures, as preserved in the Old Testament and in the Talmud and Midrashim, narrate that among the races of the world in the previous age were races of giants, men of great size, tremendous strength and ferocity, who were destroying other races, but also were turning upon each other and destroying themselves. The book of Genesis 6:4 narrates that in the antediluvial time there were giants on the earth in those days. There are also giants in Hindu writings. Now, the tallest human on record was Robert Pershing Wadlow, who was 8 feet 11 inches tall, who certainly had to have some kind of genes from giants. He had giant's disease, where the body's cells never stopped growing, but that had to come from somewhere. There is a video from George Halicki, who claims this is authentic and real footage of a true, certain giant individual from Japan, walking in some military parade. What's shocking about it is his actual size. He has a stature of at least 3 to 4 meters high, which is a minimum of 13 feet. Thus, he is genuinely taller and more massive than each and every other original NBA player. And this is a testimony and evidence, it's sort of proof here that giants did exist. Whether it proves they were the offspring of the Nephilim remains to be seen. Yes. We're very familiar with this picture from Thunderbolts. Has anyone ever realized that the guy on the left is a giant? I got the slogan with. But just like Lincoln's address to Congress, I think that there was a time when giants did exist on Earth in several different sizes at several different times. There were giant insects, there were giant plants, giant flowers, giant dinosaurs, and giant men, who were thought to have originally reached the height of 120 feet. And as gravity changed, so did their height. And Sumerian tales are rich with giants. According to these tales, Gilgamesh was a giant. And of course, don't forget Egypt. The hieroglyphics are full of giants. Hugh Newman, the co-author of Giants on Record, mentioned in his book about the monumental structures of Egypt and their relationship with giants. He wrote, "The Akbar el-Zaman, also known as the Book of Wonders, circa 900 to 1100 AD, is an Arabian compilation of medieval lore about Egypt and the world before the Great Flood. What it says is Egypt had giants galore up the wazoo. It claims that the people of Ad were giants, so Shaddad was most likely one, and it is said that he built the monuments of Dashur with the stones that had been carved in the time of his father. Before this, the giant Harjit had begun its construction. At a later date, Kaftarim, another giant, placed secrets in the pyramids of Dashur and other pyramids to imitate what had been done of old. He founded the city of Dendera. Dashur consists of the Red Pyramid and Bent Pyramid. Was constructed during the reign of Pharaoh Sneferu, 2613 to 2589 BC. Dendera consists of highly decorated pillars dedicated to the goddess Hathor. The text goes on to say that Nakros, the first king of Egypt, after the flood, with his companions built monuments, erected high towers, and executed the wonderful works, while the city of Memphis was the work of a later set of giants who worked for King Misraim. Another giant later, it describes the work of more of these colossi. Adim was a giant with insurmountable strength and the greatest of men. He ordered the quarrying of rocks and their transportation to build pyramids, as had been done in former times. There you have it. The reason pyramids were built, because they were built in former time. That's it. The only reason. No big deal. We do it because we've always done it, and for no other reason. They had no use or purpose. Just busy beavers building dams, with only one little teeny-weeny problem. Along the way, we forgot how to make them last. In fact, many myths and ancient texts are bound to the stories of giants. For example, of course, there are the Nephilims in Genesis 6:4 Bible are portrayed as giants. Besides, according to the Gilgamesh epic, Gilgamesh surpassed other kings in bodily stature. He was estimated to have been between 4.8 to 5.4 meters tall, 16 and 18 feet. The first pharaoh of Egypt, circa 3150 BC, was called Menes, or Narmer, but is more famously remembered as the Scorpion King. There is no record of his stature, but he is depicted as being very tall on the famous Narmer palette, circa 3100 BC, and during his reign, oversized artifacts were created and now preserved in a museum in Oxford, England. The third dynasty saw the Great Pyramid of Saqqara built, with numerous other temples in the complex. Djoser, who buried the gigantic king Kashekemi, and may have been his son, was the ruler of Saqqara during its construction. Within the complex, a painting of the giant, who clearly appears to have an elongated skull, was photographed by Egyptologist Zawi Hawass, examining it. Yay, Zawi!
Another proof of giants in ancient Egypt are the gigantic coffin, the Serapeum, which we've discussed before, near Saqqara. It is composed of 25 massive granite and diorite coffins, weighing up to 70 tons each, and mummified Apis bulls were sealed in them, allegedly, as part of an ancient cult. But no bull bones or mummies have ever been found. Interesting. As we have discussed in a previous show not long ago, and I told you what Brian Forrester says is that the locals told him that humanoids were found in them. Giant humanoids. And something or someone moved the tops. Another huge sarcophagus is located under the Giza Plateau in what is called the Osiris Shaft. It is partly submerged underwater. It's rarely visited or photographed. Yes, indeed. This place is just as crazy as the Serapeum. It's very intricately designed it goes down 3 levels. These are the same people that built the pyramids, that built the South American pyramids, that Teotihuacan, all those cities. These are all the same people. They use their knowledge wisely. Just like our soil, there are no nutrients in it anymore. No minerals. We have to go to the sea. And is deep beneath the stone causeway of the so-called Khafra's Pyramid. The alabaster coffin of Seti I is 9 feet 4 inches, 2.84 meters long, and is currently housed in the Soane Museum in London. He was also the larger-than-life figure depicted on the Abydos King list, and with the massiveness of his coffin. And the statues. Many giants in Egypt and South America, with the Toltecs, who even seem to have tall in their name. The fascinating one is that there is a good possibility there were Cyclops on the Earth at one time. In 1940, a newspaper in Arizona reported the finding of a giant skull in a detailed newspaper report. Then there are the Chinese giants. In 2017, archaeologists unearthed the graves of some giants in Shandong, China. And archaeologists unearthed the bones of giants in Hillsboro, Ohio, right by Serpent Mound, which I still think is the depiction of a comet. Then there is the Giant of Ohio, where workers unearthed the skeleton of a giant. One of the most famous skulls unearthed was the giant skull of a cyclops. I've never really believed it to be a fact, but it does seem that cyclops actually may have once existed. One fine foggy winter day, workmen unearthed this huge cycloptic skull. And one of the greatest discoveries was also the unique giant in Thailand. In Krabi, Thailand, to be exact. It was a male skeleton that measured 6 meters. That's about 24 feet. But I'm very curious to know what you think. I would like to read your comments. What is your stance on the giants of Earth's past? Do you think they're still with us? Or do you think they're long extinct? Let me know below. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. And I will see you later. On 23 November 1944, at the height of World War II, a base in Kortenberg, Belgium became the site of one of World War II's biggest mysteries. It seems personnel at the base were shocked to see a B-17 bomber flying low and hurtling towards them. Since no emergency message had been sent, no one expected to see the plane so recklessly flying above. Personnel at the base could only wait and watch as the lumbering bomber came hurtling towards them. They were very relieved when the bomber just missed the base's building structure. As it passed by, they noticed the landing gear was down. It hit the ground pretty hard and bounced. While it was slowing down, it was bouncing its way down the runway before eventually coming to a stop. Everyone was relieved when no one else was injured, as they waited with bated breath for perhaps the crew to come out and explain their situation. After 20 minutes passed and no one appeared, those who had observed the crash were hesitant to approach the plane. They were worried about their enemies resorting to sneaky tactics, perhaps booby-trapping the plane. So at first they believed it to be a trap. Eventually, a British major named John Crisp decided to investigate. After cautiously approaching the plane, Mr. Crisp opened the hatch. And once inside, he made a pretty startling discovery. The entire interior of the plane was empty. After Crisp found some partially eaten food, he ascertained that it had to have been at one time occupied. However, there was no one in the plane, alive or dead, and the plane's parachutes had not been yet used. How could the plane have flown and landed on a base without a crew? The military began to investigate and eventually discovered that the crew was alive and well in Belgium. They reported that the plane had been damaged and, for whatever reason, put the plane on autopilot and bailed out. I guess, damn the torpedoes wherever it lands. But just how could the plane have traveled so far without a crew? How could the crew have escaped without parachutes? And most perplexing of all, how is it that the plane could have landed itself at a military base? All these years later, these questions have never been answered. I found this to be most intriguing. So if you know, or if you have an opinion, please put it in the comments. What do you think? Now this one will go straight to Freaky Land. Well, maybe chalk another one up for the aquatic ape hypothesis. Maybe. As three friends somewhere were fishing in their boat, one of the friends claimed that he felt something grab him, and they started looking around to see what it could be, and they did. One drops a water bottle into the water, and this is what happens. Tell me what you think.
Biarin aja botolnya, biarin aja dia kabur. Botolnya itu. Dia mau keluar.
Do you think that is a humanoid mermaid type hand, or is it a prank? It's a pretty good one if it is, because it looks pretty real. And going back to our mermaid show, there have been myths and tales of mermaids and mermen, teachers of men, all throughout history. Allegedly, a German photographer photographed a movie of a real woolly mammoth in Siberia. So you think that they were extinct? This video is considered to be particularly unusual. The mysterious footage appears to be that of a long extinct woolly mammoth, the size and shape of a large tusked elephant. The creature seems too long-haired to be anything else. The timing is eerie, because by that time the animal had been known to be long extinct. So what do you think? It would have been hard to fake an 8mm film in 1948, and it has the look that it's about right for that time. Of course, that can be fake. What do you think? And if you know anything about this, do let me know in the comments. Thank you. Are we living in an alien's computer game? Elon Musk thinks it's probable. Elon Musk is messing with our heads again. This time he's saying it more than likely that life on Earth is just the creative imaging of a super advanced civilization that is playing us for their super advanced entertainment pleasure. His argument, which was covered in lots of places, runs so: Step 1. Look at the rate in which humans have made progress in computers simulating technology. Step 2. If we extrapolate and keep inventing and improving at that rate, it is entirely likely that at some point we are going to be able to simulate something that is indistinguishable from reality. Step 3. If humans are going to get there, then it's more than likely that someone has already done it. Step 4. Alright, therefore, we mere mortals are probably part of someone else's simulation as we live our lives right now, which always makes me wonder, where is the source for electricity? Musk is actually riffing on a 2003 paper by Oxford professor of philosophy Nick Bostrom. Are we living in a computer simulation? Known as the simulation argument. Bostrom theorized that one of 3 propositions is true. 1. The human race is likely to become extinct before reaching a post-human stage. Hence, Musk's imperative to get to Mars. 2. Any post-human civilization is unlikely to run a significant number of simulations of its evolutionary history. 3. We are most certainly living in a computer simulation. His argument is that the best we can hope for is that option 3 is true. But is it really likely that we are in simulation? What assumptions go into making such an argument? And can we tear apart those assumptions? We also think the argument is pointless, because even if the above were true, what could we do about it? And would it matter if what looks like reality isn't reality, but we have no access to what might be behind this reality? How could it change our lives, given that we can never find out? I just wanted to add something. You know, I know a person who had a near-death experience, and I know there's a lot of people that have. And from what he told me, just the story of the 2 guys on opposing teams working together for 20 minutes, waiting for the ambulance to get there to bring him back to save his life, is a miraculous story in itself. But when I had talked to him about 2 months later, it really blew my wig back. And he saw his dad. He had a heart attack. He flatlined for 20 minutes while they worked on him. He was a pitcher in my league. After he survived, they saved his life. 2 doctors happened to be there, and they were giving him CPR. And he told me this time that he was carried to heaven by angels, saw his dad, and his dad said, "What are you doing here?" And he goes, "I don't know." And he said, "No, you need to go back." And he pushed him, and he fell, and then all of a sudden he heard, "Shh, breathe." Now that's pretty freaky. That makes me think that we're not in a simulation, if that's the case. Finally, the Musk musings reveal a shocking lack of imagination about what aliens are capable of. How likely is it that super-intelligent extraterrestrial beings are living even remotely the same sort of lives as us? Are they also playing around on computer games when they should be doing their homework? Really? Is parental supervision equally bad in Cyborg? And why would we think we are that interesting for this species to want to play with us in their simulation? What do you think? I'd really be interested to know.
No, there's a 1 in billions chance that this is base reality.
Oh.
The master of the universe.
Well, that's going to do it for this show, folks. Please don't forget to like, share, comment, donate if you can to help the cause. Become a super supporter with Patreon or PayPal. But it's important for me to let people know who's stepping up and how grateful I am. That'll do it for me tonight. Take care. I'll see you on down the road.
I hope everything is okay out there with the signal. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the Purple Dawn 3 premiere. I thought it was fun. I enjoyed making the video. Andy gave me some help on it. It was cool. Do you see you there? Anybody there in the hall? I see names. They're all muted. Very good. Very good.
How you going there, Greg? Nigel here.
Hey, Nigel. What's up, buddy?
Just listening to your work while I'm doing some homework here. So.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, this video was fun to make. I enjoyed making it. You know, I like that stuff, the oddities.
It's all getting back to the old electrical potential of the giants and the
balls. Yeah. Everything has to do with that, for sure. Yeah. But you know, the ancients, the antediluvians, and how genius they were with everything they did. They didn't make stupid decisions like we do.
There's a lot of history conveniently disappeared over the years.
Yes, to say the least. It's like it's all been muzzled.
Yeah.
You can't really go anywhere. I mean, we're still really living with 1920s technology. It's just been improved.
Indeed. It makes me think about all the stories in the Gulf War, especially for the Museum of Antiquities in Baghdad in Iraq. It's sort of been pillaged and all that stuff's disappeared.
Yes, you know, and there's something else to that too. Just before that, a couple of months before it flared up, they had reported that German archaeologists made some kind of crazy discovery, like Nebuchadnezzar's grave or something. As soon as that news got out, all of a sudden, there's Marines in Baghdad.
Yeah.
It's a little timing, coinciding, I'm sure. There must have been some kind of ancient technology that they've discovered.
Yeah, well, and then Antarctica pops up into mind about, what are they hiding down there? And hear all those stories about Admiral Byrd and all that stuff, and all that interesting history there.
High jump, Operation High Jump. 46.
Yeah.
And I was going to say something else too. Oh yeah, they discovered underground cavern underneath the butt of the Sphinx, and Zawi Hawass.
But a glimpse of something in the water. His TikTok account got banned.
Some other guy went in there with Zawi Hawass, and they said, "Oh yeah, it's interesting. We got we found a new secret chambers, but there's nothing here. It's all empty and everything." But as he was speaking, there was another tunnel to a different chamber that they didn't even go into. And then now they've barred it off and they won't let the public. A couple guys snuck in there with their video cameras and took the video, but they got busted.
Yeah, right.
So, there's something to that. Like, well, what if, because remember Casey, the sleeping prophet, he said that underneath the Sphinx was a hall of records. I mean, what if it was something crazy like that? We'll never know.
A hall of what, sorry?
A hall of records. Housing all the antediluvian history and records.
Yeah.
Where we come from, what happened. But if that was the case, man, I don't think they would even want us to know.
Well, it's interesting. You hear the story of book burning exercise. There was World War II in Berlin with the Nazis, and then the one after that was Mr. Velikovsky.
Yeah.
Just like.
Well, get this then. Leonardo da Vinci did his Vitruvian Man about 1500 AD. And this when it's been analysed recently by this guy Alan Green, and all the angles on Vitruvian Man are those special angles which sort of the exponential angle, pi, phi, root 5, 6, 7. All these different numbers that show up in the Vitruvian Man can be directly the proportions of the Great Pyramid of Giza, and you'll have to check this barcode out. But when he's found some other proportions in that Vitruvian Man, which would correspond to 2 more chambers at the top of the pyramid. The thing about this, the very interesting thing about this, is that of course, the Great Pyramid contains all these special numbers relating to the Earth. For example, the equatorial distance, the polar equatorial distance, the diameter of the Earth, the diameter, the distance to the Moon. And the distance to the sun and the speed of light are all contained in that figure. So Da Vinci had all of this information back in 1500, and of course John Dee at the court of Elizabeth I was also very aware of this information, and it was stuff that cannot be released. But this is where the secrets are, and this information was even encoded on the front of the sonnets, and there's also a reference to it on the King James Bible. And so this is all information that was known, and people were getting burnt alive for knowing it. And the people involved.
What was the information?
Sorry?
What was the information, and where did it come from?
Well, the information was they knew exactly that the Earth was an oblate sphere. They knew exactly its diameter. They knew the speed of light.
Yep.
They knew the distance to the moon and the sun.
Yep.
And so they had all this information that the general public were not aware of.
It's all encoded in the pyramid, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the Great Pyramid.
Yes.
Crazy.
And it's encoded in Shakespeare's sonnets, and on the front of the King James Bible, by this bunch of guys, the Rosicrucians.
Rosicrucians. They're another form of Masons. They
were probably just slightly pre-Masonic, but they came directly from the Templar movement and the Knights Templar.
Both were created by the English gent that viewed America as the new Atlantis. What was his name? Come on. Oh my God.
Bacon.
Yes.
Francis Bacon.
Francis Bacon. Yes. He said.
Yeah. So he was also one. That's it, and he was also a fantastic, prolific Mason. But the amazing thing that's come to light is that, of course, Elizabeth I had a number of children who would have all been heir to the throne if she'd have just said, "Well, I'm not the Virgin Queen," because she was almost elevated to a goddess after the Armada. She was epitomised the Virgin Queen and the Queen of England, and she was a total cult figure by then. And so she refused. If she'd after 60 years had said, "Well, I'm not a virgin after all. I've got 3 kids, and one of them's the king," her whole reign would have been kind of viewed as false in history. She didn't get married. She didn't get married because she didn't want to hand power over.
When did Queen Victoria
and so she propagated that. Victoria?
Yeah.
She died about 1900.
Okay, so that was her. Because there are more places named Victoria than any other queen. So she must have been like the shit, like the big, cheese.
Oh, she saw the major expansion of the British Empire. Really, that's why.
Now, was this pre or post Tudors? Because I heard bad things.
Oh, that is only 120 years ago. Tudor was 400 years ago.
Ah, okay. See, that's your British history. That's good. That's why I love you.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So it is, and so anyway, De Vere, who was an absolute literary genius, he probably wrote most of the Shakespeare's work, and in it is encoded the fact that he's the rightful king of England. Now, of course, because if he'd have stepped out in the open and come out with that, he would have been immediately executed off James I. So basically chose to live and disseminate the information to all people. That was their mission.
Who was the
to make?
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
Sorry, Greg. Go on.
I just wanted to know who. You weren't done talking. I should have not interrupted, but I'll ask the question, then finish the thought. Who was the worst queen, like the meanest, nastiest bitch from bitches?
Well, I mean,
like, treated the people bad.
Well, I think Victoria, of course, she was just a product of where she was an aristocrat, so she had no idea really what was happening in the outside world. Of course, Elizabeth I was brought up where, well, basically her father had already executed her mother, so you know her head was by no means safe at any point in her life until she became queen. So you know they're of the time really. I think she was certainly a very intellectual and very, very clever woman, Elizabeth I. But of course, after her reign and James I came in, it was all, well, it wasn't long before Civil War happened, you know. That was a legacy, really.
When was that?
Well, that was, I might be wrong on this, but I think about 1630, something like that. And it happened for 5 years. It might be 1640. I'm not too hot on that date, to be honest. But yeah, after James I, he was the Stuart. He was of the Stuart dynasty. He was the sixth king of James VI of Scotland. Became James I of England, and he had a lot of pretty strange ideas about monarchy. He believed it again. It was God's ordained right of monarch, you know, and all that business. So he was quite a tyrant, and his kids were kind of idiots, you know. And it ended up with Charles I, his grandson, being executed at Parliament, by the Parliament. Then Oliver Cromwell took over as a dictator until they could sort something out again.
Jeez, yeah, that's pretty crazy. Now, is Queen Elizabeth is the one who's alive, the Queen now, like she's 100, right?
Oh well, yeah, that's it. Now this is Queen Elizabeth II we've got on now.
She took power in 1956, correct?
52, I think. She
53, wasn't it?
50.
Man, she's been queen longer than I've been alive.
Yeah, same here.
That's crazy.
Same here.
Boy, she sure does. They got it. Now, is she related to like Henry VIII?
Well, they're all related, you know, somewhere along the line. Yeah, she will be totally. She'll be related to just about every other member of the royal family across Europe, you know.
They all date back to one woman.
Who's that?
They all date back to one woman. All them royals just from England, Germany,
they're all related.
Italy, Spain, all those countries.
Yeah.
They all date back. I seen a program a few years ago, and they all date back to one woman.
Yeah, I heard around the time World War II broke out, the Queen, the royal family in England, and the German aristocracy that was running the country, the monarchy or whatever, and the Russians were all related. They were all like brothers or something.
It's World War One.
Yeah.
It's World War One. That's a stain on Britain.
Well, they were all grandkids of Queen Victoria. You had Kaiser William of Germany. You had I think it was Edward or George.
Albert wasn't it in England?
Sorry?
Was it Albert? Was it Albert?
Albert, no. That was Victoria's husband. But
that's right, yeah.
Yeah. But, so basically her grandkids were all, you know, royal family right over Europe.
Now, is King Arthur the rightful king? That was he was like somebody screwed him over, obviously, if he wasn't the... What's the whole deal with King Arthur?
King Arthur?
Yeah. Didn't he come from Wales and something like that?
Well, there were a number of King Arthurs. It was more of a title, I think.
The one from Blackett and Wilson. You know, are you familiar with those two?
Yeah, sure, yeah. I'm about to buy the books at some point, and I've read what I can, you know, I get what I can off the internet about them. And I watch that Britain's Hidden History channel, which is quite good. He does a program every Sunday.
Yeah, I saw the whole thing on Richard Hall's program, Rich Planet. I enjoyed that show. He has.
Yeah, I think I've seen that.
He hasn't put
Yeah.
out a new video on YouTube in years. I guess he's got a cable thing going, huh?
Yeah, but Wilson and Blackett have they've been releasing new stuff quite recently. So they're releasing a lot of interesting stuff at the moment.
Well, one of
that's from a very Welsh perspective.
But it's
Can you buy
it? Yeah, they're releasing new work at the moment, and it's from a very Welsh perspective, Welsh British perspective,
I'm sorry, I have a million questions. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Go on.
I'm trying to be patient. I want to ask another question. They were saying something about the Ark of the Covenant is buried in Wales. Do you know anything about that, where they found that cross by that church?
Yes, I have heard some stories about that. I have heard some stories about that. But the really interesting...
There is some kind of an anomaly there. They've measured it.
Yeah, whether it's that one or not, I don't know, Greg. But the very interesting thing about it is John Dee was a Welshman originally, born on the Welsh borders. And, you know, I was going on about he was the chord master who did all Shakespeare's stuff. Now, he would have understood the Welsh that Byron and Blackett were talking about, and it's very similar to because he was a linguist, but it's very similar to ancient Hebrew, the Welsh language apparently, or a lot of the words are the same. So he had information according to about the Ark, the Covenant, of course, and this again is encoded, and I think it's on the front of the King James Bible by John Dee. And he seems to be referring to Ethiopia though, and he uses his maps all coded. They're quite fantastic. And so what's being revealed about them at the moment, because they were, of course, the Knights Templar were said to have taken the Ark from the Mount of the Dome in Jerusalem and taken it somewhere. That's the last time anyone. Well, that's the theory.
I love them Templars.
Yeah, and it seems like there's information that Dee's put into his codes that are pointing at it somewhere in Ethiopia, and because they're describing it very well, and so there's more information coming out all the time, because this stuff's getting decoded, and it's been right in front of our faces for 400 years.
They've got some church there where this dude has to spend his whole life guarding it. And have you ever heard that? I've seen it on a video on it a while ago. It's very vague right now, but they were claiming they had it, and then they had some priest in there that had to stay with it or guard it or something. I don't know.
Well, that's like that. It's like that Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was in there, wasn't it? And they had these knights kind of came to life after, in that film, and they were guarding the tomb off the Nazis, weren't they?
I never watched those movies. It just wasn't my thing then,
Yeah, pretty entertaining, to be honest. I found them entertaining, definitely.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I would be into it now, but I never did watch those Indiana Jones you're referring to, right?
Yeah. But it's just interesting that these stories are tying up, from lots of different angles. Wilson and Blackett will have good information, but I'm not too familiar with that, with that thread. But I'm gonna buy all the books and read them all, so that's not a problem.
Yeah, that's pretty rich history there.
Yeah. Well, it's their view of it, and they were the first ones to blow a lot of it open. But of course, Wilson and Blackett, of course, were translating the Kolbrin, which wasn't meant to exist. Now it's gaining wide recognition that it probably predates even ancient Greek. So it's there's a lot of fascinating info coming out at the moment. And another interesting thing is that Ira Linda book that's written in Kolbrin, which was they couldn't even translate it until Wilson and Blackett had kind of cracked it. And so the stories in there are pretty rich as well. So fantastic stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of new information coming out about the history, and of course the people who've been hiding it and manipulating it and telling lies about it are losing the power to do so. There will be other attacks on our recent history, no doubt. They'll be rewriting it as we speak.
Yeah, I'm getting something together, but I'm listening to you. Keep chatting.
Hi, Gretch.
Nick, when you find those books, can you send me a link to where you get them?
I can now.
I've got them other ones they wrote through, but you couldn't get it. Like what was it, some of in Kentucky or something that locked them up? It's very impossible.
I think it's Kimrology.com. They're the publishers. Kimrology. CYMRU. Kimru. CYMRU.
.com.
Kimrology.com. I'll just check it. Great.
Nick, when you find those books, can you send me a link?
Sure thing. Sure, I will, Gretch. Yeah, because it's really, they're fantastically written. It's very entertaining reading, and it's it's very visual. That what he does. So well worth reading. And a lot. Oh, I've just looked that up, and like you say, I haven't. It's not giving me a link. I'll find it and send it to you anyway, Gretch.
Okay, thanks, Nick. Yeah. I looked to get them, and it was like they wouldn't send the few they had themselves. They wouldn't send them overseas because they found they had trouble with postage and that. And that's why if someone else doing it now, it might be easier to get them.
Right. Well,
they've found someone that'll publish, because previously they were basically self-publishing, getting someone to print them and selling them themselves.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, well, I think that's still the case. So we can get the books, but I'll see what I can sort out. Anyhow, Gretch. I mean, if I can buy them here, I could probably send them over to you. So.
Yeah, we could always work something out.
Yeah.
If that's correct. And big nights, what? No, Greg. That's marmalisation. Hey, Jack, come on down.
Hey, I don't know if you were here, Andy, you might have been, but when Eric was talking with Valerie, and the two went at it pretty good.
Yes.
I heard like a demon breathing at one point. Did you hear that? It was like,
I didn't hear that.
Something was Darth Vader breathing. And as soon as I said, "Hey, is there a demon with us or something?" We started laughing, and it went away.
I did that. I heard you say that.
Yeah.
Yes, I heard that.
It sounded like it. Yeah, that was kind of funny because as soon as I said it, it was no. It just went right away. Like, well, what was that?
So Nick, everywhere you look now, you just keep coming across stuff that links everything electrically.
Totally. It's just everywhere, isn't it? Everywhere we're bouncing into it. Everywhere.
Yeah, it's just their little brains can't work it out yet.
In every way. Even the wind is driven by an electric current.
Yeah, well, that's what Wallace Thornhill was basically saying before, wasn't he? Wind from the sun.
If you water a plant, electricity, the veins get filled with electricity. It makes the leaves stand up. It doesn't matter what it...
Yeah. Brilliant. Brilliant stuff.
So water and electricity makes things stand up.
Well, yeah, it makes sense.
It does. It does.
Yeah, I don't think we understand the relationship between water and electricity at all, do we,
Not really.
I like Ted. I like it when Ted's talking about the transfer of humans, how there was a water bridge created.
How there was a what created?
The water bridge was created because of the electricity between...
Right.
Right.
He doesn't want to say spaceship.
No. That was the spaceship,
But it's
the water bridge.
It's entirely possible, is what they were... Because the one who brought it to his attention was Don Scott.
Yes. So...
So you guys want me to play a brief video?
No.
Or do you want to talk?
I'm happy to do a video, Greg. I'm happy to listen to a bit more video or music or whatever, Greg.
While you're quickly there, Nick, how are you setting them? Oh, sorry, Greg. Say, Nick, what? How you been settling in? You reorganising things where you're going to live and all that.
Yeah, we're doing all right. I finished that wall, the area, the walling that I had to rebuild, the stone wall, and we've put these iron gates in there and fences, and then we're putting the stock fence. I've got to go and help in a little while, but we're just finishing that, the last 50 metres of that, and then the land's pretty secure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a yurt up there instead of a caravan. I think I'm just going to put a platform down with a floor and have a yurt on it, so I can have quite a large yurt up there. So that'll be nice, and it's secret and secluded, and I'll just have a little garden up there. So it's going great, yeah, Grouch, loving it.
That's really good.
Well, yeah, that's keeping good. It secure is the main thing. That's it. Because you get at night, anyone who's out burglaring or doing all that, that's there's all lurking about in the undergrowth. That's where they tend to be. So you don't want them around. You've got to be able to defend against them.
I got a good video. Gravitation. Oh, wait a minute. I gotta look at it now. Damn. It's called Cosmos Without Gravitation. Velikovsky Part 1. 26 minutes.
Good. Greg, just before you go.
Yeah.
think I worked out how that plane landed.
Yeah, well, oh yeah, I think we worked out that they were messing around with remote control. At the end
It was the spirit of a previous crew.
Well, you know, I mean, that was what it was implying. But someone mentioned remote control, and I said, well, you know, they probably were flirting around with it at that time. It's possible. I don't know that it wasn't. But it's a possible...
In 1946, Immanuel Velikovsky wrote a short book or a publication, and he titled it Cosmos Without Gravitation. Attraction, repulsion,
But could it have been the
electromagnetic
spirit
circumduction.
of a previous crew that had...
Well, sure.
That had lost their lives in the war?
Didn't you say that residual energy is left behind?
Well, yes, it could be. That's why the plane may have landed.
Yeah? I mean, I guess anything's possible. All right.
We'll throw that one in the mix, eh?
Let's check this out. Yeah, it is intriguing, Andy. It is, you know, it does beg the question, how the heck did that happen? Because I don't think they had remote control yet in World War II, but I could be wrong.
Especially in that sort of time, that's right, is they would have just been building planes because we're getting turned over very quickly.
Well, you know, the sad thing about
they didn't last long.
Is that whenever there's a war, there's rapid advancement. And only through war do we get it seems. I don't know, space program together something, but we always got to.
Well, the advancement was already... The advancement was already there, but through the wartime, the restrictions that prevented the advancement are now thrown away. The collective minds can work.
What really won the war for the West was radar, because we had it and the Japanese didn't. I don't even know if the Germans had it, did they?
I think they had it towards the end.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's play this Cosmos Without Gravitation.
Let's go.
In the solar system. That was the whole title. A synopsis by Immanuel Velikovsky. I thought it might be interesting for us to go over some of the things that he writes about in 1946. Interesting to compare them to what we know today and see if what he's saying is all that unrealistic. The contents are, number one, phenomena not in accord with the theory of gravitation. 2, attraction between two atoms, inertia, attraction of bodies toward the Earth, the time of descent and of ascent, a pendulum, the effect of charge on the weight of a body. 3, attraction, repulsion, and electromagnetic circumduction in the solar system. And 4, the anomaly of Mercury and other phenomena explained. Number 1. The fundamental theory of this paper is gravitation and an electromagnetic phenomenon. Gravitation is an electromagnetic phenomenon. There is no primary motion inherent in planets and satellites. Electric attraction, repulsion, and electromagnetic circumduction govern their movement. The moon does not fall attracted to the Earth from an assumed inertial motion along a straight line, nor is the phenomenon of objects
it's a good show, Greg.
In the
catch you later.
Atmosphere. Comparable with the falling effect in the movement of the moon. A conjecture which is the basic element of the Newtonian theory of gravitation. Aside from several important facts discovered in the study of cosmic upheavals, which are not illuminated here and only enumerated at the end of this paper, and which are discussed at length in a work of research entitled Worlds in Collision, now being prepared for publication. The following facts are incompatible with the theory of gravitation. Number 1. The ingredients of the air. Oxygen, nitrogen, argon, and other gases, though not in a compound but in a mixture, are found in equal proportions at various levels of the atmosphere. Despite great differences in specific weights, the explanation accepted in science is this. Swift winds keep the gases thoroughly mixed so that Except for water vapor, the composition of the atmosphere is the same throughout the troposphere, to a high degree of approximation. This explanation cannot be true. If it were true, then the moment the wind subsides, the nitrogen should stream upward and the oxygen should drop, preceded by the argon. If the winds are caused by a difference in weight between warm and cold air, the difference in weight between heavy gases high in the atmosphere and light gases at the lower levels should create storms, which would subside only after they had carried each gas to its natural place in accordance with its gravity or specific weight. But nothing of the kind happens. When some aviators express the belief that pockets of noxious gas are in the air, the scientist replied, "There are no pockets of noxious gas. No single gas and no other likely mixture of gases has, at ordinary temperatures and pressures, the same density as atmospheric air. Therefore, a pocket of foreign gas in that atmosphere would almost certainly either bob up like a balloon or sink like a stone in water. Why then do not the atmospheric gases separate and stay apart in accordance with specific gravities?" 2. Ozone, though heavier than oxygen, is absent in the lower layers of the atmosphere, is present in the upper layers, and is not subject to the mixing effect of the wind. The presence of ozone in the atmosphere suggests that oxygen must be still higher. As oxygen is less dense than ozone, it will tend to rise to even greater heights. Nowhere is it asked why ozone does not descend of its own weight, or at least why it is not mixed by the wind with other gases. 3. Water, though 800 times heavier than air, is held in droplets by the millions of tons miles above the ground. Clouds and mist are composed of droplets which defy gravitation. I've often wondered about that. 4. Even if perfect elasticity is a quality of the molecules of all gases, the motion of the molecules is affected by a mechanical cause, must subside because of the gravitational attraction between the particles, and also because of the gravitational pull of the Earth. There should also be a loss of momentum as the result of the transformation of a part of the energy of motion into vibration of molecules hit in the collisions. But since the molecules of a gas at a consistent temperature, or in a perfect insulator, do not stop moving, it is obvious that a force generated in collisions drives them. The molecules of gases try to escape one another. Repulsion between the particles of gases and vapors counteracts the attraction. 5. The weight of the atmosphere is constantly changing, as the changing barometric pressure indicates. Low pressure areas are not necessarily encircled by high pressure belts. The semi-diurnal changes in barometric pressure are not explainable by the mechanistic principles of gravitation and the heat effect of solar radiation. The cause of these variations is unknown. But as you notice, there's a lot that science doesn't know. It has been known now for 2.5 centuries that there are more or less daily variations in the height of the barometer, culminating in 2 maxima and 2 minima during the course of 24 hours. Since Dr. Beale's discovery in 1664, the same observation has been made and puzzled over at every station at which pressure records were kept and studied, but without success in finding for it the complete physical explanation. In speaking of the diurnal and semi-diurnal variations of the barometer, Lord Rayleigh says, "The relative magnitude of the latter semi-diurnal variations, as observed at most parts of the Earth's surface, is still a mystery, all the attempted explanation being illusory. One maximum is at 10 a.m., the other at 10 p.m. The 2 minima are at 4 a.m. and 4 p.m. The heating effect of the sun can explain neither the time when the maxima appear nor the time when the minima of these semi-diurnal variations of the minima of these semi-diurnal variations. If the pressure becomes lower without the air becoming lighter through a lateral expansion due to heat, this must mean that the same mass of air gravitates with changing force at different hours. The lowest pressure is near the equator, in the belt of the doldrums. Yet the troposphere is highest at the equator, being on the average about 18 kilometers high there. It is lower in moderate latitudes, and only 6 kilometers high above the ground at the poles. 6. Laplace, pondering the shape of the atmospheric envelope of the Earth, came to the conclusion that the atmosphere, which rotates with the same angular velocity as the Earth, and which behaves like a fluid, must be lenticular in form. Its polar and equatorial axes must be about 35,000 and 52,000 miles, respectively. At the equator, the atmosphere must extend more than 21,000 miles above the ground. At these distances from the ground, the gravitational force of the Earth is just equal to the centrifugal force due to rotation. From the measurement of the pressure of the Earth's atmosphere, measurement based also on the principles of gravitation, it has been deduced that the atmosphere is about 17, not 21,000 miles high. Observations of the flight of meteorites and of the polar auroras lead to the conjecture that the atmosphere reaches to a height of 130 miles. Meteorites, or over 400 miles, polar auroras. Radio measurements yield about 200 miles for the upper layer, recognizable through this method of investigation. Two computations, both based on the principle of gravitation, differ in the proportion of 17 and 21,000. Direct observations do not justify either of the computed figures. 7. Cyclones. Characterized by low pressure and by winds blowing toward their centers, move counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere and clockwise in the southern hemisphere. This movement of air currents in cyclonic vortices is generally explained as the effect of the Earth's rotation. Anticyclones, characterized by high pressure and by winds blowing from their centers, move clockwise in the northern hemisphere and counterclockwise in the southern hemisphere. The movement of the anticyclones has not been explained and is regarded as enigmatic. Cyclones and anticyclones are considered a problem of fluidal motion with highest or lowest pressure in the center. As the movement of anticyclones cannot be explained by the mechanistic principles of gravitation and rotation, it must be concluded that the rotation of cyclones is also unexplained. 8. The area of land in the northern hemisphere of the Earth is to the area of land in the southern hemisphere as 3 is to 1. The mean weight of the land is 2 3/4 times heavier than that of water. Assuming the depth of the seas in both hemispheres to be equal, the northern hemisphere up to sea level is heavier than the southern hemisphere, if judged by sea and land distribution. The Earth masses above sea level are additional heavy loads, but this unequal distribution of masses does not affect the position of the Earth, as it does not place the northern hemisphere with its face to the sun a dead force. Like gravitation could not keep the unequally loaded Earth in equilibrium. Also, the seasonal distribution of ice and snow, shifting in a distillation process from one hemisphere to the other, should interfere with the equilibrium of the Earth, but fails to do so. 9. Mountainous masses do not exert the gravitational pull expected by the theory of gravitation. The influence of the largest mass on the Earth, the Himalaya, was carefully investigated with plumb line on the Indian side. The plumb line is not deflected as calculated in advance. The attraction of the mountain ground, thus computed on the theory of gravitation, is considerably greater than is necessary to explain the anomalies observed. This singular conclusion, I confess at first, surprised me very much. G.B. Airy. Out of this embarrassment grew the idea of isostasy. This hypothesis explains the lack of gravitational pull by the mountains in the following way. The interior of the globe is supposed to be fluid. and the crust is supposed to float on it. The inner fluid or magma is heavier or denser. The crust is lighter. Where there is a mountainous elevation, there must also be a perturbance beneath the mountains. This immersed perturbance being of lesser mass than the magma of equal volume. The way seismic waves travel and computations of the elasticity of the interior of the Earth force the conclusion that the Earth must be as rigid as steel. But if the Earth is solid for only 2,000 miles from the surface, the crust must be more rigid than steel. These conclusions are not reconcilable with the principle of isostasy, which presupposes a fluid magma less than 60 miles below the surface of the Earth. There remains a contradiction between isostasy and geophysical data. Over the oceans, the gravitational pull is greater than over the continents. Though, according to the theory of gravitation, the reverse should be true. The hypothesis of isostasy also is unable to explain this phenomenon. The gravitational pull drops at the coastline of the continents. Furthermore, the distribution of gravitation in the sea often has the peculiarity of being stronger where the water is deeper. In the whole Gulf and Caribbean region, the generalization seems to hold that the deeper the water, the more strongly positive the anomalies. As far as observations could establish, the sea tides do not influence the plumb line, which is contrary to what is expected. Observations on reservoirs of water, where the mass of water could be increased and decreased, gave none of the results anticipated on the basis of the theory of gravitation. Remember, like I told you before, they have not made one correct prediction. It's amazing. 11. The atmospheric pressure of the Sun. Instead of being 27.47 times greater than the atmospheric pressure of the Earth, as expected because of the gravitational pull of the large solar mass, is much smaller. The pressure there varies according to the layers of the atmosphere from 1/10 to 1,000th of the barometric pressure on the Earth. At the base of the reversing layer, the pressure is 0.005 of the atmospheric pressure at sea level on the Earth. In the sunspots, the pressure drops to 1/10,000th of the pressure of the Earth. I wonder how they can measure that. The pressure of light is sometimes referred to as to explain the low atmospheric pressure on the Sun. At the surface of the Sun, the pressure of light must be 2.75 milligrams per square centimeter. A cubic centimeter of 1 gram weight at the surface of the Earth would weigh 27.47 grams at the surface of the Sun. Thus, the attraction by the solar mass is 10,000 times greater than the repulsion of the solar light. Recourse is taken to the supposition that if the pull and pressure are calculated for very small masses, the pressure exceeds the pull, one acting in proportion to the surface, the other in proportion to the volume. But if this is so, why is the lowest pressure of the solar atmosphere observed over the sunspots where the light pressure is least? 12. Because of its swift rotation, the gaseous Sun should have the latitudinal axis greater than the longitudinal, but it does not have it. The Sun is 1,000,000 times larger than the Earth, and its day is but 26 times longer than the terrestrial day. The swiftness of its rotation at its equator is over 125 kilometers per minute. At the poles, the velocity approaches zero. Yet, solar disk is not oval but round. The majority of observers even find a small excess in the longitudinal axis of the Sun. The planets act in the same manner as the rotation of the Sun, imposing a latitudinal pull on the luminary. Gravitation that acts in all directions equally leaves unexplained the spherical shape of the Sun. As we saw in the preceding section, the gases of the solar atmosphere are not under a strong pressure, but under a very weak one. Therefore, the computation according to which the ellipsoidity of the Sun that is lacking should be slight is not correct either. Since the gases are under a very low gravitational pressure, the centrifugal force of rotation must have formed quite a flat sun. Near the polar regions of the sun, streamers of the corona are observed, which prolong still more the axial length of the sun. 13. If planets and satellites were once molten masses, as cosmological theories assume, they would not have been able to obtain a spherical form, especially those which do not rotate, as Mercury or the Moon, with respect to its primary. 14. The harmonic law of Kepler views the movements of the planets as depending only on their distance from the Sun. According to Newton, the masses of the Sun and the planets must also enter the formulas. The Newtonian orbits differ from the Keplerian found empirically. The Newtonian formula has a sum of masses instead of a product of masses, and in view of the largeness of the Sun, the Newtonian orbits are supposed to not deviate substantially from the Keplerian. 15. Perturbations of planets, due to their reciprocal action, are pronounced in repulsion as well as attraction. A perturbation displacing a planet or a satellite by a few seconds of arc must direct it from its orbit. It is assumed that the orbits of all planets and satellites did not change because of perturbations. A regulating force emanating from the primary appears to act. In the gravitational system, there is no place left for such regulating forces. 16. The perturbating activity appears unstable in the major planets, Jupiter and Saturn, between the minimum of the year 1898 to 99 and the maximum of the 1916-17. There was found an 18% difference. As these planets did not increase in mass in the meantime, this change is not understandable from the point of view of the theory of gravitation, which includes the principle of the immutable gravitational constant.
I know what you're thinking, punk.
The pressure of light emanating from the Sun should slowly change the orbits of the satellites, pushing them more than the primaries, and acting constantly. This pressure should have the effect of acceleration. The pressure of light per unit of mass is greater in relation to the satellites than in relation to their primaries, but this change fails to materialize. A regulating force seems to overcome this unequal light pressure on primaries and secondaries. 18. The Sun moves in a space at a velocity of about 20 kilometers a second in relation to the nearby stars. This motion, according to Lodge, must change the eccentricities of some of the planetary orbits to an extent which far exceeds the observed values. 19. The motion of the perihelia of Mercury and Mars and of the nodes of Venus differ from what is computed with the help of the Newtonian law of gravitation. Einstein showed how his theory can account for the anomaly of Mercury. However, the smaller irregularities in the movements of Venus and Mars cannot be accounted for by Einstein's formulas. 20. Unaccounted for fluctuations in the lunar mean motion were calculated from the records of lunar eclipses of many centuries and from modern observations. These fluctuations were studied by S. Newcomb, who wrote, "I regard these fluctuations as the most enigmatic phenomenon presented by the celestial motions, being so difficult to account for by the action of any known causes, that we cannot but suspect them to arise from the action in nature hitherto unknown. They are not explainable by the forces of gravitation which emanate from the Sun and the planets." 21. It was found that the strength of radio reception was nearly doubled with the passing of the Moon from overhead to underneath the observer. It does not appear reasonable that the relatively small gravitational tide in the Earth's atmosphere, which changes the barometric pressure by less than half of 1%, could account for a sufficient change in altitude of the ionized layer to produce such marked changes in the intensity of reception. The lifting of the ionosphere generally results in better radio reception, and the small tidal action by the Moon when overhead should improve reception a little, not impair it. In any event, the Moon cannot have a marked effect on the ionosphere without being itself a charged body. But if the moon is charged, it cannot behave in its motion as though the gravitational force alone acts between it and the Earth. 22. The tails of comets do not obey the principle of gravitation and are repelled by the sun. There is, beyond question, some profound secret and mystery of nature concerned in the phenomena of their tails. Enormous sweep which it, the tail, makes round the sun and perihelion, in the manner of a straight and rigid rod, is in defiance of the law of gravitation, nay, even of the recorded laws of motion. J. Herschel. What has puzzled astronomers since the time of Newton is the fact that while all other bodies in the sidereal universe, as far as we are aware, obey the law of gravitation, comets' tails are clearly subject to some strong repulsive force, which drives the matter composing them away from the sun with enormously high velocities. W. H. Pickering. 23. The change in the angular velocity of comets, especially of the comet Inca, is not in accord with the theoretical computations based on the theory of gravitation. 24. Meteors. After entering the terrestrial atmosphere at about 200 kilometers above the ground, are violently displaced toward the east. These displacements of the meteors are usually ascribed to winds blowing in the upper atmosphere. The atmospheric pressure at a height of 45 kilometers is supposed to be but a small fraction of 1 millimeter of mercury. On the other hand, the velocity with which the meteors approach the Earth is between 15 and 75 kilometers per second, on the average about 40 kilometers per second, or over 140,000 kilometers per hour. If winds of 150 kilometers per hour velocity were permanently blowing at the height where the meteors become visible, it would not be possible for such winds of rarefied atmosphere to visibly deflect stones falling at the rate of 140,000 kilometers per hour. Approaching the Earth, the meteorites suddenly slow down and turn aside, and some are even repelled into space. A few meteors give the appearance of penetrating into our atmosphere and then leaving it, ricocheting, as it were. 25. The Earth is a huge magnet. It has electric currents in the ground and is enveloped by a number of layers of electrified ionosphere. The Sun possesses an electric charge and magnetic poles. Also, the sunspots are found to be powerful magnets. The ionosphere is permanently charged by particles arriving from the Sun. Sunspots actively influence terrestrial magnetism, ground currents, the ionosphere's charge, and auroras. As the principle of gravitation leaves no room for the participation of other forces, in the ordinary movements of the celestial mechanism, these obvious and permanent influences of the electromagnetic state of the Sun on the magnetic field of the Earth, the ionosphere, the auroras, and the Earth's currents are not allowed to have more than zero effect on the astronomical position of the Earth, and this for the sake of maintaining the integrity of the gravitational principle. Well, sure, if you change that, you got to change everything, right? Sun and moon, comets, planets, satellites, and meteorites, all the heavenly host, air and water, mountain massives, and sea tides, each and all of them disobey the law of laws, which is supposed to know no exception.
Comes right in and kicks their ass. They're just like, yeah, file that, will ya? I'm afraid I'm going to have to say goodnight, folks. We've been going strong for about 9 hours. I'm tired. And we're going to have to make breakfast soon for my hungry family. So I'm afraid I have to leave. I will come and say goodbye.
You are engaged.
Oh, I could just keep going and going, but duty calls. One day they won't want anything to do with me. Nick, it was nice having you in. You know, I want to chat more, but I gotta be a dad. Yes, Greg is an awesome force. Thank you. I think so too. No, I'm serious. I'm only serious. Gargoyle, what's up, buddy? What's up, man? Hey, buddy.
Gargoyle.
Have you ever watched the SpongeBob movie? Him and Patrick go into this place and they eat this ice cream till they get drunk. Hey, Patrick, what's up, buddy? It's funny. Yeah. And then I got that assassin chasing them around. Yeah. I used to watch SpongeBob with my kids. Nick, it's good to see you. Shockwave is into halves. Now, see, now I want you guys to come in and let's have some good chatting, but I gotta go. This is why I want to start doing something on Sunday afternoons. We'll get a regular thing. It'll only be for like an hour. You know? We've got to keep a bridle on it. It can't get out of hand like this is. But yes, I want to do that. And I feel bad for leaving, but I gotta go. I just wanted to say goodbye. Grouch, good to thank you. Nick, always a pleasure. Marmy. And looks like Shockwave's been here for a while, man. Always inviting you, and you're never coming. We miss you over here, buddy. Oh, well, here's someone new. Lucia Salat? Let's see.
Lucy Salat.
Good to meet you, Lucy. And who else do we got here? Leo White. Good to meet you, Leo. I gotta give you the tradition.
Leo White.
Yes. Is there anyone else new? Oh yeah. Well, you guys are always fun. If jeez, man, you see, I feel bad now, but I gotta go. Love, man. You know, let's put more love in the world. And I guess I'll see ya. Take care. I'll see you on down the road. Oh, I forgot to do the most popular tune of the week. Let's go to the SoundCloud. I'll play the most popular song and then log. So let's go do that right now. This week's winner is Popular Tracks. American Band still? Oh, man. Oh, let's do, we'll end it with Electric Universe. I want to get the long version, though. I don't want the short version. Well, I guess I should stick to it. We already played Zombie 5. We're Learning to Fly. We played that. This blues tune, it's okay. It's not my favorite, but Don't Let Me Down Slow. I wrote that in the 90s. And Electric Universe. It's Gizm Gel. I don't need you anymore.
Down. man, just let me know. I got good love for you, baby, let me know. Don't let me down slow. I know we've been through this before, but I electric universe.